we're very glad to have you all the way from Maryland in the great US of A, and especially to speak with us tonight about, well, the sixth part of your series, which we're calling Scottish Loyalists in the 18th century, specifically in the 7 Years' War, or what's known in the USA as the French and Indian War, when the British fought the French along with some of the Indian tribes that were associated with the French. And so basically, you've been looking at prominent officers of Scottish descent who were fighting in the British Army. And so far, we've covered Major John Pitcairn, General Simon Fraser, Major Patrick Ferguson, General Edward Braddock, and General John Forbes, in that order. And these guys were fighting in the French and Indian War, which, for the benefit of the viewers, was in the USA, was between 1754 and 1763. So that's the period in which we are talking, generally speaking. And this was 12 years, well, the end of the French and Indian War was 12 years before the start of the American War of Independence from British. So this is a period where there's a lot of conflict going on. There's a lot of fighting. Lots of different groups of people are involved. The Native American tribes are fighting on all sides as well, because they're just looking out to see where their best interests are lying at any particular moment. And a fascinating period that not very many people know about. So tonight we're going to talk about Sir Peter Halkett, who was another Scotsman who there.
I always love the tassels on that portrait, on his uniform.
Indeed. So let's kind of begin at the beginning. And
sure. I just want to offer very quick clarification with regards to the past figures. So Major John Pitcairn did indeed participate in both the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution, and so did General Simon Fraser of Balmain, though Major Patrick Ferguson was really only got properly involved after the 7 Years' War, and was mainly just involved in some other side, like in between conflicts, but mainly the American Revolution was his main forte. And then afterwards, we did focus on Edward Braddock, General Edward Braddock, who there's some controversy about whether he was Scottish or English, because his name is very Anglo-Saxon. But there's debate about where he was born, and it's possible that it had to do with him coming from a military family. So they moved around and they commuted between Scotland and England. So he may have been born in England or Scotland. We're not 100% sure, but there is a tradition that he was born in Perthshire. So that's open. And then we did General John Forbes, who was definitely a Scotsman. And so and he was famously the one who took Fort Duquesne, which Braddock failed to take in the French Indian War. So that's what we're up to now. And now we're doing Sir Peter Halkett.
Excellent. So I was doing a wee bit of research into him today, and he was born in a castle that many people certainly in the Dunfermline area will know about. And we've got a photograph of it here. Now, what's that one called again? That's it's Pitcairn, Pitcairn House, which now I believe is like a museum or perhaps a golf club.
Yes, it's associated with a golf club now.
Yes, yes. So obviously he was not of the common herd, as it were. He was born into
nobility. And the families, the lowland Scottish families in this region of, relative, either noble or gentry, or at least, well connected, sort of upper class, knew each other and knew each other well. And there was a lot of intermarriage and interconnection in these families. And so, for example, Halkett and the Halkett family were quite well known and connected to the Forbes family from the previous episode. And they also would have been connected and known of the Pitcairn family, who are also from that same region, same general vicinity, and interconnected with each other. So Sir Peter Halkett was indeed a lowland Scottish noble, and he was both a military man in the British Army and also a member of Parliament for a time. And he participated in the government efforts to quell the Jacobite rebellion of 1745, when Bonnie Prince Charlie comes to Scotland to try to reclaim the crown for his father. And so this is something that is important to point out, because a lot of people forget that the Jacobite rebellions were civil wars across the British Isles. They were not England versus Scotland, far from it. Many Scots fought on the side of the Hanoverian government. And also you have, Jacobites from across, the British Isles, English and Welsh and Irish, so they weren't just Scottish. And, there was a lot of complexity and layers to this. So you had very prominent people and families who were Scottish, who were very supportive of the sitting, Hanoverian monarch, etc. So,
Yeah,
so basically,
that's absolutely well understood among certainly those of us who've taken interest in that here in Scotland.
Unfortunately, popular culture tends to mess this up, especially with Outlander and other programs that just sabotage history really badly. But this is the fact of it, is that and the nationalists, the nationalists have a very they have a very propagandized view of the conflict, and they want to try to use it to forward their own sort of political goals and agendas and so forth. And so that's that. But anyway, Sir Peter, getting back to him, he participates in the Battle of Prestonpans. So this is not too far outside of Edinburgh. And so he's under Sir John Cope. And he is in this losing battle for the government side. The Jacobites win, basically rout them. And so Sir Peter gets captured by the Jacobites. And the Jacobites are struggling to figure out how to deal with their prisoners at this point. They've taken on prisoners and they don't know quite how to house them. So they're presented with a situation where they're like, do we execute our prisoners or do we try to extract from them a promise that they, will basically, if we let them go, will they vow not to come back and fight us in this theater of war? Okay. So that's what they do. They put to everyone, look, you guys, this is what the prince also wants, because for all of his flaws, Bonnie Prince Charlie had a good reputation for genuinely trying to be humane, trying to be merciful. So he didn't want to mass execute people. So basically they're saying, okay, do you want to take this sort of oath that you're not going to serve against us again? So Halkett does so. He says, okay, I take the oath, and that he leaves. So fast forward a little bit in time, and we get to the Duke of Cumberland, who is King George II's son, who's the one basically now in charge of trying to crush this rebellion. And he calls upon Halkett to come back to the field to fight the Jacobites. So Halkett refuses to do so. Cumberland continues to press him to do so. And Halkett, again, strongly refuses and very famously says, "Your Grace, you are the master of my commission, but not of my probity and honor." And so this was a big deal. He's challenging the king's son. He's challenging the person in charge of crushing this rebellion. He can get accused of insubordination. Right. And it's something it's very much of a statement as well, because this is someone who's a lowland noble. And, in this time period, lowlanders and highlanders had a lot of animosity toward each other. It was an intense sort of thing. Now, Halkett actually owned lands in the Highlands, though. So while he was a lowlander, he still did have connections up there. And he felt that I gave my word on it. I don't care. And people would say to him and try to talk him down off of this and say, they're Highlanders. Some of them are even papists. You don't have to keep your word to these people. And he wouldn't budge on it. He said, I gave my word. I don't care what their region is or their religion. I gave my word. I won't break it. And so Cumberland is angered by this. He sees it as insubordination. And he suspends his commission, Halkett's commission.
Right.
And so Halkett starts to become this name now because he's now becoming kind of a high-profile case due to this situation. And he's determined to fight for it. Now, I'll give a very brief side quest on Cumberland just briefly because he gets spoken about a lot. He has a lot of negative reputation because he was very brutal. He gets called Butcher Cumberland and Stinking Billy for a reason. It's not misplaced. But I will say that, he's a little more complicated than some portrayals because while, yes, he's absolutely ruthless towards rebels, no matter what stripe they are, it's not so much an ethnic thing. Some people portray it as him either being anti-Scottish, which is nonsense, or anti-Highlander, which is not true. He actually was quite supportive of any Highlanders who were in favor of his royal house. He just was super anti-rebel. It's also very interesting because he was the kind of person who did have his own code of honor, his own chivalric streak. We see this over on the continent, right? During the War of Austrian Succession, Cumberland actually has a good reputation for chivalry. So, for example, when he's wounded in battle, he insists upon the enemy, this is the French, the enemy wounded officers being treated before he is treated. And he also has a very good reputation among his own men. They consider him very generous to them, very considerate of their needs, very, inspirational to them. So he's good with them. Also, in very brief, one anecdote that I think sums up this characteristic of his, which is that he feels if you do him a good service, he will go far and away to return that service. So there's a quite famous Catholic priest, Father Alban Butler, and this is a time period when Catholics are still, basically Catholic priests are, banished from the British Isles for the most part, and are not allowed to, do their ministry in Britain. So this is an exiled Catholic priest who's at one of the seminaries on the continent, Father Alban Butler. And he is an Englishman. He's just in exile basically because he is a Catholic priest. And again, this is during the era of the penal laws. So Catholics have all kinds of disabilities against them in terms of the government and in terms of, functioning and they have to pay fines and all of the rest of it in Britain.
Yeah,
so anyway, Father Butler on the continent, because he's an English speaker, obviously an Englishman, he gets recruited to help with the British wounded during these big battles that have raged and to take care of the British wounded and to negotiate prisoner exchanges between the French and the British and so forth. So he is so helpful and so compassionate to, well, frankly, his fellow countrymen who are in this position, that Cumberland learns of this. And Cumberland is the kind of guy, again, if you do a favor for his men, you're doing it directly for him. So he says to Butler, listen, do you want anything? If it's within my power, I will grant it. And so essentially, Butler says, I want to go home. and even though it's illegal to do so. And Cumberland says, fine, you go home. I will personally guarantee your safety. So Butler does go home, and then he becomes quite famous for, this is something that's very well known in the Catholic world. What he's most famous for is writing a series of biographies of the saints. It's called Butler's Lives of the Saints. And this is enabled by Butcher Cumberland. Really, without Butcher Cumberland, inadvertently, these works that are Catholic classics would not exist. So that's him. Scrolling all the way around, though, we must say he hated rebels. He had no toleration for them, and he was very low patience for anyone who questioned his methods or anyone who dissented. So that's that, and we're back to Halkett.
Okay, back to Halkett. And he's still exiled from the British Army.
Yes, he's exiled from the British Army, as are a number of other, again, officers who tried to do anything Again, this is just tiny info. There's another guy very much at the same time as Halkett and in kind of the same mode of being in trouble, Charles Whiteford, who also was a Lowlander Hanoverian, who also tries to go up against Cumberland when he's saying, look, this guy spared my life when he could have killed me in Prestonpans. Same thing, same situation. And he says, I want to try to get a pardon on his behalf. Cumberland will have none of it. He says, wait, I want to at least secure his family's safety. Cumberland again will have none of it, and said, I want to secure his lands. Nope. And then he finally says, look, if you do not grant any kind of mercy on this, I want you to exile me. I want you to blot me from your book, essentially, because I will not serve a sovereign who cannot show mercy to a defeated enemy. And weirdly enough, in this actual particular case, Cumberland did soften slightly because he valued Whiteford's skills so much, he kept it on board. But going back again to Halkett, we get that Halkett struggles to get his commission back. He fights to get it back through legal means, and is determined to get himself rectified and, restored. Ultimately, after his name gets quite famous for this across Scotland, and he becomes this figure that symbolizes the penalties of honor, I guess. It's like, it doesn't always instantly pay to be honorable. And so basically he ends up eventually, after gaining quite a lot of renown and respect across the political aisle and across the regional aisle and religious aisle, he gets his commission back because King George II, amazingly, intervenes in his behalf and restores it directly. Going in contrast to his own son, Cumberland was his son who just won a great victory for him, but he still upholds Halkett's honor. So that he is restored. So that, again, he has a great deal of fame associated with the name because of that. So then we get to the 7 Years' War, French and Indian War. So now he's restored. He goes over to America to be part of General Edward Braddock's expedition to take French Fort Duquesne. And he goes over with his two sons, Francis and James, who are serving under him. So he and Braddock work together on this. They struggle to get supplies and to get, wagons for this gig, and they're trying to struggle working with different colonial bodies of government and so forth. And anyway, they end up at Monongahela. And as I went into in depth, I'm not going to go into it again. This was a massacre, basically. The French and their Indian allies attack the British, and it's a total slaughter. And, it just ends really, really badly. So
that's right. Let me just clarify for the listeners. This is the Battle of Monongahela,
Monongahela,
which was 9th of July 1755. So that's the period that we're looking at, and it was a massive defeat, as you say, for the British against the French, along with their Indian tribes. And Britain, what had Britain been trying to do at that battle? What was the aim? Was to capture Fort
Duquesne. They were trying to take Fort Duquesne from the French,
and they failed at this time at
that point. They did indeed fail.
As we mentioned, as you mentioned, was it last time around? They actually succeeded 3 years later
Forbes
in taking what was a vital strategic outpost in that particular war. So while these guys
where Braddock failed, Forbes succeeded. So they finally got it. But
so your man Halkett here is part of the Braddock team, and unfortunately, and we'll just wind this up now. But
okay, I'll get to it real quick. So basically, Halkett ends up Halkett gets he fights very gallantly. He gets shot. And then very tragically, his son James, upon seeing him get shot, rushes over to his father and himself is killed and gets shot. And then his manservant tries to go over and help, and he too is shot. So it's this kind of horrible, kind of family tragedy. And so the surviving son, Francis, can't even get over to try to deal, with the corpses of his family. And so, however, he comes back. He's determined to go back and find them. So he is on Forbes' march. And don't forget, the Forbes and the Halketts were close because they came from the same area of Scotland. And they were of, the upper crust. So he is with Forbes on that return trip, determined to find his father and brother. They go back to Monongahela. They see all of the skeletons lying around. It's very distressing for everyone who goes on this mission. but they finally find these two skeletons and wrapped together almost like they're in an embrace. And they think, oh, this could be it. Oh, he's not sure, and nobody can really tell now at this point. But he says, my father had a gold tooth. My father had an artificial tooth. Check that. They check it. It's there. He gets so overwhelmed, Francis Halkett, he's like, oh my God, it is my father, that he faints into the arms of his comrades. And then ultimately he has his father and brother buried in Highland plaid, which is, again, this beautiful thing because they're lowlanders. And the great tensions of the aftermath of the Jacobite Rebellion were such that to have a lowlander breach this gap with the Highlanders, at this time, and just he manages to transcend all of the disruptions of the age again. So he gets laid to rest there with full military honors as they could provide, at least wrapped in Highland plaid. And again, he just comes to represent how people, in this society that was so broken into so many factions, so many different types of people with so many issues with each other, whether it was religious or ethnic or political or what have you, that this one man and his honor was such that he becomes this symbol of the best really to be had in Scotland, the best to be had in Britain, the best that there was hope for unity, that there was hope for union in the end, to be found really based upon this person's legacy, again, of just decency and courage and honor. So he stands out as this very unifying figure, a true nobleman in the most profound sense of the word. So I think that really is sort of the takeaway of the story, and how he was able to bring together so many different aspects of British society, so many different types of people, who were natural enemies and would oppose each other naturally, but they were able to be brought together through his legacy, through his memory. And again, in a way, he also is this forever connection from America to Britain, because he's still here. He's in Pennsylvania. So, right there, it's kind of like he forever claimed it on some level for Britannia through his very presence here. So there's that. He was a unity figure, like you, Alistair. So
Do you know what? I like the way, though, that you summarised that as well. A man who fought for the British government forces against the Jacobites, lost at the Battle of Prestonpans on the 21st of September 1745, swore to the Jacobites that he wouldn't take up arms against them, consequently was chucked out of the British Army by no less a man than Cumberland, but was reinstated by George II, but who didn't take up arms against the Jacobites. He went to fight for Britain in the USA against the French, who were causing mischief over there. So very interesting story, not one I'd ever heard of before, not one that many people would ever likely hear of if they didn't watch.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that he's not better. It's very unfortunate he's not better known, like so many of these other figures. I mean, I feel like they should be just way better.
Do you know what?
known,
I mean, he's going to be better
Britain.
known. He's going to be better known after this program, because what we'll do is we'll clip what you just said there. We'll get that out. It's going to get hundreds of views.
Wonderful, and that's why we do this.
We'll make sure.
That's why we do this. We're trying to honor the noble dead, really.
That's right. Now, you do have a book out. It's called Search Amazon for All. It's
indeed.
called All Ye That Pass By, and people can get it by simply
gets
searching
referenced
Amazon.
in it.
Halkett is referenced in it. Very good. So rather than putting up a very complicated Amazon URL, all you need to do is to go to amazon.co.uk, or in America, amazon.com, and search for quote unquote All Ye That Pass By. Now, you've also got a YouTube page, which is youtube.com/at Avellina Balestri, Avellina Balestri, for the benefit of
And there's a
those listening
song
on the
on there
audio
about
podcast.
Monongahela in which Halkett gets referenced, called Braddock's Sash. So he gets stands, he and his son, so his sons.
He gets a reference in your song, because not many people
Mhm.
know you're also a singer and songwriter, and your website address is Avellina Balestri, all one word, .com. Avellina, it's been a pleasure to speak to you. I don't know if you've got any more Scottish people lined up that you're investigating.
Oh, yes.
We've done 6 of them.
We have. Well, what I was going to propose, now that we've veered into Jacobite territory, what I would like to do next time, take a little change up from doing stuff happening in the American wars, and instead do Colonel James Gardner, who was killed at Prestonpans. It was another government Scot. He's a favorite of mine, so I'd really like to do him next.
Let's do it. You're usually
Excellent.
on every 2 or 3 months, so we'll look forward to having you back on, and you can research up on that guy. I'm sure you already know a huge amount about him anyway, and we'll
Absolutely.
make sure
I'll print out some quotes from him because he was quite the writer.
Okay, good. Well, Avellina, thanks very much for everything. Hope things go well for you over there stateside, and we look forward to seeing you again.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. God bless.